Hey friends, welcome to another episode of our podcast here at KPC. We are thrilled to have you and glad that you may be listening wherever you are into your week. It's a Wednesday for us, so we're a little bit later in the week. We're getting ready for our community Bible study, week 3 of Bible study happening tonight. So listen, the eager ones may listen to this before community Bible study tonight. Not likely at this point in our day will it be published before community Bible study.
A week behind officially now, but that's okay. It was a long weekend here in Canada, and we took Monday off, which was nice. Yeah, so.
We did to assemble various outdoor cooking utensils and throw out various backs. It was a good long weekend. Yeah. We are hopping into a conversation on Luke chapter 6, which will surprise nobody who's been following. We've been in Luke 6 now for I can't remember how many weeks. I think that is actually just week 3 of Luke 6, but 6 verse 27 to 36, which is in many Bibles subtitled, Loving Your Enemies or Love for Enemies. And Justin, I love the way that you started off Sunday after I got my kids dropped off frantically to Kid Zone, like Sunday school, and then made it back into the sanctuary. I think I caught just that one line. He said something along the lines of like, this might be the easiest passage to intellectually understand, but the hardest passage in the Bible to actually do the thing.
It's kind of like it's Sunday school 101, right? You know, like what do you learn when you are like first learning? It's like love everybody, right? Yeah. And that everybody, period, right? And obviously enemies, and we'll unpack a little bit more of that, but like that are included in that.
Yeah. So do you want to read it quickly? It's not long, and then we can hop into some questions.
Sure. So Luke 6:27 to 36. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. Love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful.
It's it's a powerful verse or series of verses. Like you said, I think it's fairly easy to understand what Jesus is saying. Really hard to walk out. Yeah. Really hard to actually do. And I'm not going to lie, I think part of it is because he starts off with the hardest one. Yeah. Love your enemies. Yeah. Do good to those who hate you. In some, it's really interesting how different versions translate that opening line. But to you who are listening, I say, because some of the translations read something along the lines of, actually more literally, like, listen. To you I say, or to you I say, listen. Love your enemies. It's almost like a command. The listen, it's though it is like those who are hearing, but
he really wants us to hear this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's
absolutely
clear. He's like, guys, if you were nodding off a little bit, like, come on, listen.
Pay attention. Yeah. Pay attention. And, the word there does have a lot to do with hearing, but the implication of it isn't just the act of hearing. And I think like any parent is going to be sitting there going, I know this difference. I know what's about to come out of that guy's mouth before I've even said it. Like, it's not words going into my ears and my knowing them. Yeah. It is this hearing to comprehend, or comprehending by hearing, by listening. There's an intentional act here required. Jesus is saying, sit up, pay attention, listen. and then comprehend what I'm telling you to do and go and do it. So there's a lot even just wrapped up there. But I thought it might be helpful for us to start off with just some quick recap from Sunday. You used 3 words fairly regularly through the sermon. That would be helpful for us to just redefine. And the first is love. But in this context, it's agape love. It's divine God toward humanity love. It's very specific, and I think you called it self-sacrificial. And I don't know. So let's redefine that, and then also grace and mercy.
Yeah,
because I really appreciated how you pointed out that credit there. Like, what credit is that to you? Is actually charis. Like, it's the Greek word for grace. What grace is it to you, or how are you being gracious? If everybody does that, then there's no grace there. And is essentially, I think, what you brought to light for everybody, which is helpful. So love, agape love, grace and mercy.
Yeah, love. I think the biggest takeaway that I could say is that the word love, the word agape here, it does not require emotion in the way that we would consider, when I say I love my wife, there is an implied degree of emotion. When I say I love my daughter, there is an implied degree of emotion there. Agape love does not require that. It is, I think I said this, it's an act of the will. And so we have to separate what our modern Western understanding of love is for us to actually understand what Jesus is saying here.
Yeah.
That's where it is. I think it's clear what Jesus is saying, but there are some nuances that help our understanding. And that's one of them. It's freeing. It is freeing that we are not like, okay, great, I don't have to have warm fuzzies toward a dictator,
Right.
In my call to love everyone, including those who hate me or are actively seeking to harm me in some way. I don't need to have some sort of emotional response other than, hey, I love you because God calls me to. It is the right thing to do. And I will seek good for you regardless of how you treat me. That is an act of the will, not an emotion.
Yeah. Act of will, I think, is a really helpful way. Like, there's a whole generation of us who maybe grew up on DC Talk. Like, love is a verb. And
that was my very first cassette.
My very first CD that I bought. Yeah.
See, that's where you're a couple years younger than me, and so mine was a cassette.
There you go.
Yours was a CD.
I think I still have that CD. Yeah.
I lost it and then bought it again.
And still have it?
I don't. No, sadly.
Twice over, man.
Yeah, twice.
But I think, so here's what I really appreciate about your definition. I don't need to convince myself to feel a certain way about somebody to accomplish what Jesus is commanding us to accomplish here. He's not saying feel differently about that person who harms you.
That.
Right.
Yeah.
And it feels like you betray your emotions and you betray yourself in some way. Your experience, all of what you're feeling, right? As helpful and unhelpful as emotions can be, they are both.
Yes.
But what Jesus is not saying here is feel differently about somebody. He's saying act differently toward someone.
Yes.
And one is not just simply not attainable in some scenarios, and the other is.
And you can't. It's another thing where you can't just fake it till you make it. It's
right.
not. It's not that either.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, if I just act on this, I will eventually have some affection. No, that might never happen.
Right.
When you're dealing with difficult people, the expectation is not that I will eventually feel warmly toward them. Yep. That is not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we're going to come back to that because I think you pointed out just the nuance and difficulty of enemy and who we read in as enemy and what does this mean for somebody who has been abused with their abuser. And there are some lines that I think the Christian church have fuzzied and crossed. And, you were very crystal clear, This is not in any way Jesus saying remain in an abusive relationship and turn the other cheek to physical abuse and violence. Like he's being very clear here. This is not that. And you were clear on Sunday with that, which I appreciate. We're going to come back to all that by way of, some conversation around how to proceed in more difficult scenarios and circumstances, but give us grace and mercy, and then we'll hop into the other questions.
Yeah. So grace, when he's using that word grace, what credit is that to you? What grace is that to you? How are you being gracious? How are you extending a gift? Because grace can also be understood as a gift. It is something that you are, an unmerited gift that they are recipients of. And I think in this context, you could look at, say for instance, I brought you a gift. I mean, maybe you deserved it, maybe you didn't. Right?
Somebody brought us a gift this morning.
Yeah, those little cookies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that was a wonderful gift.
It's delightful.
Yeah. We might not deserve it.
We might not have deserved it, but maybe we earned it in some way. Maybe maybe we're like anyway. The point that Jesus is making here is that when you do this, you need to be able to do it for people that definitely didn't earn it, because otherwise it's not grace. It's not. This is not a gift. This is not offering something that is of meaning or value. If they're just people that are your peers, your equals, people that you are on good footing with, it feels a little bit. It's not selfless. It's not selfless if we are reciprocating gifts for one another, if we have an arrangement that, you buy me a slice of pizza this week and I buy you a slice of pizza next week, it's not really a gift.
No. And there's it's purely transactional.
Yeah.
This is like the teaching team. We were talking about a couple different examples. So this is like the team who gets together ahead of the community Bible study, talk through the passage. What are we hoping for people to move through, questions that we're anticipating, all of that kind of stuff. And then a few of those people are the ones leading it on Wednesday night, just, in case you're flying in blind on what some of these words mean. There are these shows, right, where like the Big Bang Theory and Sheldon Cooper just not being able to receive a gift. And he's like, I can't, he just overly gives back because it's got to be equal for this guy. Or, in New Girl, where two of the characters go berserk because one gives the other a cookie. And he's like, you gave me a cookie, I give you the cookie back. We're even, like we're equal. I don't know how our friendship can't progress unless you take this cookie back. And like that's not what grace is pointing us toward. I like talking about grace as unmerited favor. So it's unmerited, and it's favor. It is something added to giving toward graciousness. It's a gift. Okay. And mercy.
Versus mercy, which is not receiving, and you phrase this better than I did, but let me just try to work this out a little bit because it's always helpful to work it in real time. Mercy is sort of the negation of grace. It's sort of the negative version of that, there where we ought to receive something, usually like a punishment, and we do not receive it. It has been, so in the case of, like a judge and you're in a courtroom scenario, just the thing that's the easiest to think about is they're about to pronounce a judgment because you did something wrong that you ought not have done. And instead of punishing, the punishment is withdrawn. That's a mercy, right?
Yep.
They'll look at something in your life, say like, well, they had a rough upbringing and they're doing hard work to get themselves in good order. So I'm going to extend mercy to you.
If I get a speeding ticket, or if I get pulled over speeding, or if I blow through a red light and the cop comes up and he's like, listen, like I got you on camera. Like you were doing 100 and the speed limit's 80, or you went through the light. It was red. It wasn't yellow. No matter how many times you think you saw it, like it was red. And instead of ticket, you're given a warning. Like that's mercy. That's what mercy is. It is withholding punishment where punishment was due.
Can I confess something?
Yeah.
One time I got pulled over. It's like 10 years ago. And I was right at the end of like, I'd had a series of, let's say, less than stellar driving activity. And I was almost at the point of like, I would have almost lost my license.
Oh no.
I haven't had a ticket in over 10 years.
So this, we're going to go back a little ways. Disclaimer.
In my younger, more reckless years. I could not get a ticket. So I literally begged the officer for mercy. Like I used the word, "Can you please have mercy?"
Yep.
Like I'm trying to right this ship, but this isn't going to help me.
This is the tipping me in the other direction. Yeah. And
he knocked it down to just like the kind of 15 over, 15.
no points.
No points.
He had mercy.
He had mercy.
Yep.
He still, dinged me $50, but had mercy.
Yeah. Withholding something that is warranted, right?
Yeah.
That is earned.
I deserved it. I deserved that. I was definitely driving 30 over. You know?
So like grace is getting something that you don't deserve. And we're talking like a positive, in a positive way.
Yeah.
Receiving it is a gift given that you don't deserve. Mercy is withholding a punishment that you would deserve or do deserve.
And in the context of this passage, we are talking about people that hate us. Therefore, it's very easy to say, well, you don't deserve my agape love. You are not deserving of me to lend to you, to extend you grace, to extend you mercy. And so it's very practical here. And God in the end is driving home the point. Okay, I've been gracious to you. I've given you gifts that you didn't deserve. I've been merciful. I haven't done the thing to you that you do deserve. So do the same. You have been, and I think that this is strong language that I think I can back this up. That there have been times where people are enemies of God in some way, and yet God extends grace and God extends mercy.
Yeah. So you read a verse like, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
Grace, mercy.
That is both of the things, right?
Yeah.
And God says, and you put this rightly, like, go and live differently because of what you've received. Like, it really, it's hard to describe in words. I try to draw it out, and it's hard to picture, but it takes the transactional between like human to human and puts all of the burden of the transaction on God. So the way I treat you is not based on the way you treat me. The way I treat you is based on the way God has treated me.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And the way you treat me is not based on what I do to you. It's based on what God has given you. And, I think like human beings, like we like transaction, like we like the simplicity of it. And sometimes I find that's just helpful. Like it shifts it from this horizontal person to person, and it puts all of the burden on God. So God's been the one who's given grace and mercy. He has been kind and loving, and that out of that storehouse that we're called to act toward the other.
Yeah. That's great. That's good.
So in that vein that vein adjacent, we've been talking around this idea of loving enemy. You asked on Sunday and had us thinking through like, who is my enemy? And I wanted to push that a little further. And I think that's a good question to ask. I wonder, can there also be, do you think, a danger in us maybe being a little bit too zealous to name enemies? Is there something there that maybe we like to grab onto as human beings? How do we navigate that tension? Jesus is saying very clearly, like, love your enemy. The implication is you have enemies. There's other questions like, does he mean enemy to you exclusively, or is this a tag on those who hate you and persecute you because of the Son of Man, like those who are your enemy because of Jesus?
We asked that question, didn't we?
Yeah. So like, is this just my enemy, or is this someone who's an enemy toward me because of what Jesus has done? All of that. But so do you think we can jump to naming enemies too quickly? And how can we resist that a little bit?
So I think Christians, not all Christians, but some Christians, can jump to having a persecution complex. And as I said on Sunday, there are Christians around the world who are facing genuine threat of imprisonment for even just gathering to worship and to read the scripture and to sing together. That's a very real thing. But lots of contexts where that is not the case, and yet Christians, any potential removal of freedom or any sort of even perceived removal of freedom of any kind, or just a realignment with a waning Western Christianity, will cry persecution. I say we, not me personally. I try my best to not do that. So I do think some Christians can jump to using the word enemy too quickly. I think I actually do the opposite. So I am very hesitant, almost perhaps to a detriment. I am almost hesitant to use the word. I don't think the word in our modern vernacular, I don't think it represents what Jesus is intending here. The problem is, again, we don't have a good word, one word, that encapsulates what Jesus is saying, which I believe to be when Jesus says, love your enemies, I said they would have heard it as love your Roman occupiers. Maybe if you were in a particular sect of Judaism, it would have been against other sects within Judaism. Maybe skip ahead a few hundred years, and maybe it would be for Christians and or Jews to love one another because they were hateful toward one another. Christians and Muslims, Jews and Muslims, right? So on and so forth. Go through history. You can name lots of enemies to one another. And here we are in North America. I don't have a great category for that. I do have a great category for people who seem to be hateful toward me, toward people who seek to harm me in some way, toward people who are actively seeking to bring the work of the church down, or even the work of a particular church down, so I think there are many ways in which we could understand enemy in a modern context, but to the point where for most contexts that we encounter, at least here in the West, I don't know that enemy is the best word because of the connotation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. Like when so my default is to look up definitions of all these words out of concordances.
What do you got?
I mean, a lot. I mean, there's a lot. And some of the definition doesn't help and some does help, because, when I'm looking at like the Greek language, ekthros being the word for enemy here, it just says properly an enemy. But then
unhelpful.
I'm like, so okay, great, fine. That's still. But then it starts to break it down. Somebody openly hostile. So openly hostile toward me. Irreconcilable hostility, right? Bent on inflicting harm.
Yeah.
And that one I go, okay, now it starts to make sense. Because that, I think you're right. We do have categories for people who just seem, for whatever reason, bent on causing harm.
Yeah.
And, that harm could be physical, it could be emotional, psychological, spiritual. There's a lot of different ways in which we now understand harm.
Yeah. Because harm can be a little nebulous in and of itself.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's the piece where Jesus says, love your enemies. And then he almost clarifies it. Pray, do good for those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. And so he's almost saying, love your enemies. What do I mean by that?
Here's some examples.
Do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. And so he's giving the disciples and those early followers trying to live life inside the kingdom, he's giving them some really fast answers to questions. Be like, well, who's my enemy? No, stop it. If somebody hates you, do good to them, right? Okay, well, what about like if they curse me? Well, bless them, right? What is the if to curse, to speak ill of somebody, he says, speak well of them.
Yes.
Like, so he's literally turning all of these things. So to somebody who hates you, do good. Like, fill the void that is the evil or the darkness with what is good and light and full of the kingdom. Yeah. So now we've got some really concrete things. Pray for those who mistreat you.
And I think prayer in that moment, like, we could be praying for them, maybe that God would change their heart, that God would change the trajectory of their life in some way. But there's also like an effectiveness in praying because of what it does for me, right? That if I am saying, God, I want to pray for this person that is hurting me, that is abusing me. It's about God. We pray transforming them, but also it's going to transform me and my heart toward that person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So continuing on through, we've got these commands: give to everybody who asks, but if somebody takes what belongs to you, don't demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. And then he doubles down, right? Jesus doubles down. And it's like, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Like, who cares? Even sinners do that. Like, come on. Like, how are you any different? And the implication is you're not. You're not any different than anybody else. If you do this, everybody does this. This is like base human expectation. But we get this line, I think it's verse 35. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. Again, I loved how you broke that down. Your reward will be great. ... In other words, read it this way. You will be children of the Most High. That's the reward. This is proof that you're living inside the kingdom, and there's benefit to living inside the kingdom. Absolutely, there is. I guess my question is, and I along with others, this is not just this me. But through all of chapter 6, is it not just in some way Christian karma? Like, we've been wrestling out this tension between like do what's right, not to get a reward, but you'll also get a reward. Don't be like everybody else. Be like this. But if you give, you're gonna get back, and we're gonna see it again tonight at tonight's Bible study on Wednesday. We're whenever this is for you. Today doesn't work on podcasts, I realize that, but as we continue through chapter 6, we're gonna see even more of this. Do good and it will come back. Like, good will be done to you. We're going to talk about a great measure being shaken up and then poured out on your lap. Like, if you do good, you're going to receive a great measure of good things. How is it not just Christian karma?
It's okay. It's a good thought. So, and actually now that you say that, someone at my table group actually did say, and there's someone who they're, I think relatively new to faith in various ways. They were like, this actually, this kind of seems like what goes around comes around, And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting that someone who is less familiar, for those of us who've grown up in the church, we probably read this a number of times over the years. They're less familiar with this, and they pulled out the karma card,
Yep.
Okay. So where does it differ? In my mind, there is some overlap. Right. In the same way that the golden rule, as we said, it is found and almost codified in every culture, people group across time, ever since civilization, that has been some rule, right? Maybe not an official law, but it's but the one thing to note is that Jesus's inversion of it leans positive. Do to others as you would have them do to you. A lot of the other ones are more along the lines of don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. It's a little bit more passive, and Jesus is more active and positive. So that's one thing to note. So the distinguishing feature for me that separates it from karma has got to be grace and mercy. There's got to be
Yep.
grace and mercy in that you could claim that when bad things are happening to someone, even to yourself, then it causes us to reflect, what have I done? Because if it's gone around, it's now come back to me. And I apologize if this is a very rudimentary understanding of karma. I am not an expert on Eastern religion. So, but I think that when we take away grace and mercy from the equation, it kind of is karma. That you'll get what you deserve and you'll get what you get. In this case, Jesus is saying, even if someone doesn't deserve something, even if someone is quote unquote undeserving of love, extend it anyway. That is the way of the kingdom. And in some ways, karma is based on fairness, that it feels fair. And I would argue that much of Jesus's ministry and his entire life and his death and resurrection are about what is not fair. That it is not fair that Jesus took that upon himself for me. It is not fair that I, as a broken, sinful human, get to receive the benefit of that, right?
Yeah.
And so that is where karma, I think you could actually draw some other passages from the rest of Scripture that have a little inkling of that, right? But Jesus kind of blows it up.
Yep. Yeah. The cross kind of interrupts. I think the cross
Sure
interrupts
does.
the flow of karma, as it were, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that's worth noting, and again, it's been a minute since we've spent time studying, since I've spent time studying Eastern religions. So again, intro, very rudimentary understanding here in what I'm about to say. But karma in most of the way it's spoken about is toward freedom of suffering.
Yes.
So the end result or the ultimate result of buildup of karma is these cycles of birth, rebirth, toward freedom, release from suffering.
It's all coming back to me now.
That's the ultimate goal,
Yes.
is to release your body, your soul, your mind, your spirit from suffering. And so, like what goes around comes around is kind of the like colloquial, everyday, this is how we understand life. Like if I do this, this is going to be done back.
Effects.
It's exactly. Proper understanding of karma includes this toward an end, and that end is freedom of suffering. And Jesus actually says, no, the way into the kingdom is through suffering.
And you see that even in this passage. There was a number of commentators, I can't recall which ones off the top of my head, that highlighted this idea that Jesus is actually calling us in some ways to suffer here.
Yeah.
That there is a pain of sorts in laying down our pride, in laying down what we think is right and just, and saying, I will choose a better way. I will choose a higher way. That is something that it is so difficult to do, and there's suffering and sacrifice in that process.
And that's why it's important that we start with self-sacrificial love.
Yes.
Right? That's the understanding of agape love, as being one that is willing to sacrifice of self for the other.
Yeah.
Which in my mind is just completely blows up the idea of it being Christian karma.
Yes.
It can't be that.
Yep.
No, I love it. I think that's great. Okay, moving on. Some of the other questions that we've been talking around, I think would be good to land on in some specific ways. So we talked just briefly today, and you mentioned loving people when life is hard. when relationships are difficult, when there is even, degrees of abuse, when you have a dysfunctional, broken relationship that can't be mended for one reason or another. What does it begin to look like to love in those contexts?
Yeah.
And, let's just double down again on this idea. Like, loving somebody doesn't mean being a doormat, getting walked all over, trampled, putting ourselves in unsafe situation time and time again. So help us understand love and boundaries.
Oh, funny you mentioned that.
Right? Oh, yep.
Where did it go? Oh, there's this book here. I just found it on the ground.
Just like that.
It's called Boundaries. No, it's been a minute since I have read that book. But Grant put that in my lap.
I'm like, here.
He said, here, I'm going to prime you for a question.
Let's talk about this. Yeah.
Boundaries is kind of the answer in some ways, in that it is not a requirement for me to be in regular and direct communication with someone for me to love them. I have friends who I love that I haven't seen in several years. One of them called me out of the blue yesterday, which was kind of a nice little surprise. I was like getting gas and he called me up and I was like, dude, like it's so good to hear your voice, but I haven't seen him in like 3 years, I'd like to change that. But in the same way, for people that are difficult, people that have been abusive, say you have a narcissistic relative, say you have an abusive relative or friend or whatever. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is have boundaries and say, I love you and I love you too much to allow this to continue.
Yeah.
And I have friends and family who have made that hard call with direct family members of saying, I cannot be in an active relationship with you right now. You can still say you love that person in the same way that, again, with agape love, it doesn't require feelings. It doesn't even require that I know the person, that I can say regarding, I'll just use the easiest example in the world. If I lived in the 1940s, like to be able to say, I have to, God calls me to love Hitler. Like that's a obviously a bit of a stereotypical example, but I think it drives home the point. I likely would have never met Hitler had I lived in the 40s. And yet that does not require me to be in relationship with them actively. But I think that's a little bit too obviously out there of an example. Like bring it home again a little bit more to family. If I have a family member that is acting and behaving poorly to me, I don't have to put up with that. I don't have to be a doormat. I can be in whatever level of communication I am comfortable with, right? That if their presence is challenging to me, or to use more of like the clinical word, activating to me, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be in their presence. I've done that with family myself. I had a family member that I did not see for 2-3 years because I said, I cannot do this right now. And that was arguably the most loving thing I could have done in that moment. Yeah.
So that's what I want to press in on, because I think that we can sometimes, like, and here's the interesting thing. I think we do this to ourselves. Like, very rarely do I hear somebody else say to like a friend or family member, "Oh, you have to love that person. You're a Christian." Yeah. Like, we do this to ourselves though. We think, "Oh, God calls me to be loving, so therefore I need to do A, B, and C."
I need to set aside. I got to set aside these awful feelings I'm having inside.
Yeah.
That feelings in this case that I think we should honor, feelings that are probably there for a reason. just to keep the peace.
Right. Or
Yeah.
continue to put myself into a situation where I continue to receive harm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Because, well, that's what God calls me to love this person. So I need to go to that family dinner every week, or I need to go to that, enter into, the relationship in whatever capacity. I need to see that person, etc. And I think the thing that we all need to wrestle with is the reality that, like you said, sometimes the most loving thing is to establish boundary. Because for a variety of reasons, but one of them, not the least significant, is if I and like I'm not actively in this situation right now. Like I don't have this situation in my life. But if I'm continuing to put myself into a relationship and invest in a relationship where I'm continuing to be hurt, well, then what am I also doing? I'm continuing to enable that person to hurt.
Yes.
And so it is this cycle that is only going to have a potential for healing if it's arrested.
Yes.
That cycle needs to be broken.
Yeah.
So in order for there to be repair in any relationship, there also needs to be rupture. And sometimes boundary is required, in the long term. Now, I'm not saying that every single relationship is going to have this degree of healing.
No, many won't, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think what many of us need to hear is that reality that to continue to put yourself in that situation is not only doing yourself harm, but it's continuing to allow somebody else to perpetrate harm.
Yeah.
And sometimes that boundary is good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that boundary can be a wake-up call for somebody.
Yeah.
And somebody needs, a family member, a friend, or somebody they love and think they love and respect and are actually harming and hurting, to say, okay, no more of this. I'm not going to put myself in this situation. The onus is now on you to realize and recognize what rupture has occurred, like what brokenness has taken place, and to move into it. Now, like that's like I think I'm an optimist most of the time. It's not, not everything is going to be neatly tied up and fixed in the end. But I think I see too many people continuing to put themselves in harm's way because they think that being actively engaged in the relationship in exactly the way everybody expects and wants is the loving thing to do.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is it's not.
And I will say, I know, there's a story of someone I know who, they were in an abusive marriage, and they tried to leave. They tried to, assert themselves, and they went to the person's church. This is not anywhere in this area, so it's, this is many years ago. They went to the church, and the church said, you need to go back and you need to submit and you need to, just endure, know? And so I want to say very clearly that is antithetical to what Jesus is saying, and nowhere is that an acceptable thing for a church to say or do.
Yep. Yeah. I'm like physically reacting.
Yeah.
I'm physically because I have family who went through that exact like I've extended family who went through that exact same scenario and who have all walked away from the church because of that exact reality. And like it breaks my heart. And it also makes me really angry and upset.
So angry. And I said that to the person. I said, like, I am so angry on your behalf that church betrayed you in that way. Yeah. And that was like a good moment of healing for her, where she was able to realize, like, okay, not all churches are like that. Yeah. So that was hard, but super, super meaningful to be able to unpack that with her and to untangle some of the stuff that Christians, unfortunately, can sometimes weaponize scripture to fit a particular belief structure. And I would say that is the opposite of what Jesus is saying here. In Jesus's examples, they are in some ways about the person asserting themselves.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that, and I think the sad reality is that this is the common. It seems like commonplace that many people have these same stories, and I think about now how many generations have been impacted by, my a family, that is now 3 generations impacted. Because of that exact decision. 3 generations not engaged at all with church or faith or any type of meaningful spiritual practice, because of one church interacting with one couple. Okay, so not to do like a harsh transition here, but harsh transition
but it is hard to
incoming.
transition
It's hard to
from
transition
that.
out of that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the positive, potential here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we could go through many different iterations of where we've seen churches and people and where we ourselves have failed at doing this well. Let's talk about the positive side, which is like, I got a neighbor, and that neighbor's constantly, the aggressor, not in like overly egregious ways, but inconsistent and, negative ways, or the I don't know, the same car that cuts you off at the same point of your commute every single day. No, but just like the everyday moments of life where we can begin to flip the script, because that's really what Jesus is saying. Flip the script, right? Somebody slaps you across the face. They are claiming authority over you. They've taken something from you. He says, no, turn the other cheek. Force them to slap you with the front side of their hand, which I love your like demonstration of all of that. But
I needed the visual.
Me too.
Yeah.
What does that say? Is it reclaims not authority over that person, but it reclaims equality. Yeah. That's what Jesus is saying. He's like, don't let anybody take from you what is given by God.
Yeah.
And so he's saying, hey, like maintain equal footing. I don't know. How do we begin to love our everyday enemies?
Yeah, because I mean, the reality is, in most of our lives, this is going to come up with family, neighbors, coworkers, things like that, right? Very, very rarely, I can't think of an entity like a government or a nation or a people group that is currently actively working against me. Now, that may not be the case for everyone, but in general, this becomes at a very personal level of the spheres in which we find ourselves every day, right? So, like, I'm trying to think of like a simple example, and I don't want to provide an example where I've done it poorly, because I have done it poorly, but would love, actually, I'm going to use my neighbor as a positive example. Okay. So my neighbor, nice guy, a little rowdy, like, he's anyway, he often has parties and whatnot. So a number of years ago, it was New Year's Eve, fireworks went off, not at midnight as they intended. Went off at about 3 a.m. I think they had too much to drink, and
they celebrated New Year's in Vancouver.
That's right. So they missed it, and we're like, oh shoot, we better use our fireworks, and wake the whole neighborhood, and the neighborhood was not happy. What I appreciate though. So I was messaging him the next day and was like, hey, I got like firework shells all over my yard and car and driveway. And he was like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm going to come by and clean it up once I'm, up and at 'em. No problem. Got this. I'll take care of it. And ever since then, ever since then, this has been really cool. So all of a sudden he's been inviting us to like some of his, like he bought a smoker and like had a whole bunch of people over for a big get together for dinner last year. And then this past weekend, it was Victoria Day weekend here in Canada. And he was like, I bought fireworks. I'm going to go do it at the corner lot that's empty. Why don't you and your daughter come out and watch the fireworks
at 8:30 p.m.
And it was at an appropriate. It was more like 9:30, but I let her stay up late. You know, so like, and it was actually like a beautiful little like cool. I don't know, like a good way. I think that could have gone real sour.
Yep.
You know, for on both of our ends.
Yep.
Right. It could have gone real sour where I could have really dug my heels in and said like, bro, you are destroying my stuff. He didn't actually destroy anything, but like, you know, I could have exaggerated. I could have gotten very offended. But I was like, man, that's not a good way to be a neighbor, you know? And I think equally him on the other hand, he was like, okay, I need to maybe temper things a little bit here, you know? And I was like, that's actually a beautiful picture of what good neighboring. It was not perfect. You know, there are times when, you know, we have to cover our child's ears when we're outside. But it's really like, I think there's something beautiful there. But I recognize that sometimes we are trying with our neighbors and they are not always going to reciprocate in that way.
Yeah.
I'm almost tempted to use the kind of, it's a cliched phrase, but I almost feel like kill them with kindness, like keep going. Don't let them get the better of you. Drop off a box of cookies and a note. And maybe even in that note, because in efforts of not being, a doormat, if there's something that they're doing that is bugging the heck out of you, maybe like put in a little reminder. Hey, love being your neighbor. Wonder if we could work on this. And if they still don't reciprocate, keep going. Keep going. They will be frustrated by how happy you are. Maybe that's idealistic. Maybe that is too, too optimistic about human nature. But I like to think that if we can maintain a level head, not allow our emotions, the negative emotions, to get in the way, that we could actually make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, I think you had a line in your sermon that said something, I'm going to misquote it, but resist the temptation to fight back.
Yeah.
And try to be reflective instead of reactive. My kids are watching Daniel Tiger. He sings a song. I'm not going to sing it. When you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4.
I love that.
Anyways, so we're working on that one. But like I like that. Keep going. There is a call to perseverance and just steady doing the next right thing because it's the right thing. And don't get sucked into the this for that and back and forth. Don't get sucked down to someone's level. Don't get pulled over. Like, don't allow somebody else to define who and how you are, right? Is really, I think, what we're after. You had another line that you brought up, and I think it was a quote from somebody, and I don't remember off the top of my head who it was, but who said, the Christian is the one who does the extra thing.
Yes, William Barclay. The Christian ethic is, the Christian ethic is the extra thing. To do the extra thing. Doing the extra thing. Yeah.
That was a really helpful line because it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just the extra thing.
A little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't use this example in the sermon, but it made me think of when Steve Jobs was still with us and would do his big Apple presentations. I'd always watch them, and then he'd always go, one more thing.
Yeah.
One more thing.
And then it was the biggest thing.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody knew.
And that was kind of ringing in my mind a little bit. I was like, you know what? Everything was kind of status quo, and then one more thing. It'd be cool for Christians to live that way.
One more thing.
Yeah. And sorry, was there more to that question, or do we just muse on that? Or
no, exactly that. I think that's language that helps maybe for this to resonate every day.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I think our minds naturally go to the biggest and baddest of situations and enemies and et cetera.
Yeah.
And we lose sight of the fact that really what Jesus is doing here is giving this is Christian ethics for the road. This is for on the way, in the, on the journey, in the course of life. They're not like he's not got a solution and a scenario for every single thing that's going to happen to you, right? This is not, it's not a manual to be like, well, so buddy cut me off when I was already stopped at a stop sign and he blew through. So I'm gonna, like, you can't find that page where Jesus says, if this, then that, right? That's not exactly what he's after. It's not a if this, then that sort of solution to everything. What it is a general way of being that defines the Christian or the one who's living inside the kingdom as being different. This is about right-heartedness, like your heart being directed toward Jesus or pointed in the right direction, and then continuing to do the next right thing in that direction, as opposed to it being just this solution for every different scenario that may arise. I think what he's saying is do the extra thing.
And it's going to be an everyday faithfulness just in little things, and then in the bigger things as well. It's in even just little attitude adjustments. And I say that for me. I've been thinking upon after the sermon on Sunday, I had a little rest time, and then we drove to my in-laws for dinner, as we often do on Sunday evenings. And I didn't get cut off. No one did anything to me, but I saw a particular vehicle that I have a particular disdain for.
Ooh, I saw one too this week.
And fill in the blanks.
Oh, I know. I'm not going to say it, but I know.
And I started lipping off a little. I started, and my conscience, aka my wonderful wife, she called me out, and she's like, wait, no, granted, she was teaching Sunday school. So she didn't hear my sermon, but she knew what the topic was. Okay. She knew what the topic was. Yeah. And so she was like, wait, what did you preach about this morning? I said, dang it. Dang it. And she's so right, as she always is. And she'll be happy to know that I said that. Yep. But honestly, like, it's those little attitude adjustments where I was like, why do I care so much about that thing? And like, that's not to say we can't have genuine gripes about situations and people and ethics and all of those things. But it's, what is happening in my heart in that moment? Yep. I need to sit with that. I need to reflect on that a little.
Where we're headed this week more so as well is, like, I think more than anything, this is like holding a mirror up to yourself. Yeah. Right? And I think I might actually do that. So, if you come on Sunday, I might have a mirror up on the stage with me, because I think it is, like, as much as we want it to be that, like, I'll hold a mirror up to you so you can see yourself. Really, these are just my notes. This isn't a mirror. It's nice
all the
questions. Thank you. Well, listen, it's nice when it's small, but when I try to write on that big board in the sanctuary, it just goes sideways. So what Jesus is doing is he's holding up a mirror to yourself, right? And like so much of what Scripture does is because I'm human, I want to make it about the other person and be like, this is going to help you be such a good person, when really it's meant to convict my heart first and change my life. And so I think the small things every day make the big things easier. And like, I don't like that. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. It's like in or out, like, just tell me which way we're going. But really, this is a case where it's the everyday discipline of those moments where you're like, I'm going to intentionally choose to not think down this path. And I'm going to think down this path instead. It's that everyday discipline of doing that that helps you face the big monsters in your life, right?
And
like
even,
the big situations.
and even just like owning it and being able to talk freely about these things, having a little podcast confessional here about these things helps me to be able to like be accountable in some way, right? Where like I don't want to be a person marked by judgment and cynicism and like I want to think the best of people. That's what Jesus is calling us to. He's asking us to love them and to seek their good. And when I'm not doing that, I am not living out my role as a son and heir in the kingdom of God.
Which I think is a great place to end.
It is. There's so much more we could have talked about.
A lot.
We didn't get to talk about enemy in Christian music lyrics.
Oh, we didn't.
Songs,
no, we didn't.
But that's okay. Well, it'll come up again.
It'll have to be its own special,
bonus
episode. I think the thing that maybe is worth leaving people with is just by acknowledging again, like, this is hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And
I messed up after preaching. So.
Well, this, and I've had those. So I will never forget the first time Connie said literally those same words. Like, she turned to me. She's like, "I think I heard a sermon about this. I heard a good sermon about this today." I was like, "Oh my goodness, how? Yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah,
it's not an easy, simple thing to do. But the good, meaningful, right things rarely are. And like, as cliche as that is in some ways, I think that is true about this. Like, you began with that. This is easy to understand. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
So start today with a small thing, just the next right thing, and then try for the next right thing after that. And I don't know, try to debt snowball that thing. Like, but like that, I think that's the best approach is make the next right decision and get people around you who can help keep you accountable to it and point out when we fail at it.
Yeah.
But until next week, we hope that this encourages you toward meaningful and sometimes difficult conversation. And we'd love to continue to hear your questions and comments and feedback to our email. We look forward to seeing many of you Bible study, Sunday services, and throughout your week. Peace.